Hey, Greg Pickel.
Bob Flounders.
We have a special State College edition of the
That's
Penn
right.
State Blitz here on PennLive. And there's some news again for the second straight week. Last week, Tommy Stevens decided he was going to stay at Penn State. Kind of a big deal. No transfer.
Right.
Kind of read between the lines here, though, today. We're going to talk about Micah Parsons, the Harrisburg High School star.
Yep. January
enrollee. Began spring working at middle linebacker.
Correct.
But James Franklin just told us he's now at the will position, which means now they've now moved him to a position we kind of thought would be a better fit, outside linebacker.
Yeah, it makes sense for a few different reasons. Obviously, when they're in the base package, it takes the responsibility of needing to direct a defense essentially off his plate, which that's tough for a redshirt freshman, Bob, let alone a guy who just came on campus. Oh, no, by the way, played defensive end in high school.
Yeah.
So I think it makes sense. The other thing, too, when they go to their 4-2-5 that Brent Pry likes to throw out there a lot, he's now in prime position to do whatever they want him to do. If they want him to drop him back and carry someone down the field, perfect. If they want him to go up to the edge, good. So it makes a lot of sense. I think it was smart to try and see if he maybe mastered middle linebacker just by pure natural athleticism. And it's not to say they won't move him back there, but it makes sense at this point in time.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that the takeaway from that is I think the Penn State defensive coaching staff feels good about Ellis Brooks, who I think is now kind of being groomed. I think of all the young guys, I think he is best suited for the middle. James talked about him last week being ahead of the freshman.
Right, yeah, no question about it. I mean, this is a guy that, remember when Penn State got him out of Virginia, it was a big recruiting win for them down the stretch. He takes a year off to get bigger. Now here he is, like, being a starter. Penn State got a good group there, and Brent Pry has plenty to work with.
Okay, another mid-state guy, Zach Kuntz, is learning the tight end position this spring from Camp Hill at Penn State. And you could almost say that it's almost identical to what Mike Gesicki went through in 2014, but there's one big difference. Penn State's recruited to the point where they don't feel like they need to play Zach this year if they have to.
Yeah, talking to Trace McSorley, the name Danny Dalton came up 3 or 4 times.
Dwight Galt mentioned him as well?
Yeah, so when you were up here, correct. So you have to think he's the guy, right? I mean, at this point in time, I would have to assume he's their guy at tight end, which isn't to say Zach Kuntz will be ruled out.
Sure.
But it was quite clear from James, good in the pass game, of course. He did a bunch of that at Camp Hill. Not so great in the run game, of course. He obviously needs to put weight on, and he's also never really blocked them.
Yeah.
So you put those two things together, that's where we're at.
And I think just watching him, to me, he looks like a wideout. I know that he's gotten bigger. He is 6'7". He's a great athlete. James talked about that. But it just really looks like a wide receiver running around out there. But just to follow up, what does that say about John Holland and Nick Bowers? The fact Danny Dalton would not have been my pick in January to be the guy that takes the lead at tight end. How do you interpret it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear at this point that both of those guys have a lot of room to make up. Now, granted, maybe it just wasn't Nick Bowers' day to be brought up. We've seen that before, where Brandon Polk was brought up, and then the next week, KJ Hamler was Mr. Spring breakout star. So perhaps that's the case. The read between the lines, though, it's Dalton and then a little bit further down the pecking order.
Okay, so let's talk about a couple of veterans who could figure prominently in Penn State's defense. John Reed, the corner, started in 2016, played very well, missed all last year with a serious knee injury. James said he is ready to go if we had to play a game tomorrow.
Right, and I think that's great news for Penn State. You assumed as much. He was around the team as much as he could be last year. He traveled with him to Signal. Said that, if they were going to play on Saturday, he'd be out there. So I think that, and you heard him talk too, I mean, I think that if he's doing everything an older guy would normally do, and I think that's a good thing. He's not doing anything special because of his knee. He's doing what the older guys do because they don't need 15 spring practices to get ready for game shape.
Yeah, and one other thing, he is also in the mix to be a punt returner. He did that as well in 2016. The problem is there's a guy that was a first-team All-Big Ten punt returner in front of him with DeAndre Tompkins. It's probably a good problem to have, but we'll just see who's more important and how they view it. John Reed's important, especially at the slot corner position, and if they have him along with Tariq Castro-Fields and Amani Arawari, I think they feel very, very good about their corner room. One other thing to bring up, I was surprised by this. We kind of had it in our heads, Greg, that Nick Scott was going to be one of the safeties, and it was probably going to be a young guy that kind of factored in. But just listening to James talk, Garrett Taylor, a guy that's had a lot of promise but's never really seen the field, separated himself today, and you just wonder if he can carry that through into August.
Yeah, no question. I'm wrong frequently, and I'm wrong about this.
Yeah, I was
did
too.
not see that coming whatsoever. I thought it'd be Lamont Wade, Jonathan Zulu, and look, James talked glowingly about both of those guys as far as I was concerned, but to hear Garrett Taylor came as a corner, moved back to safety last year, didn't see the field a whole lot, Now they obviously have a starting spots to compete for. He's risen to the challenge. It's a good thing to hear because you were wondering about him. Now the bad news is Aaron Monroe has been banged up, not been doing too much. Johnny Patrician was mentioned at the very tail end of things. I think those two guys probably out of the running. But to hear Garrett Taylor made that much of a jump is very encouraging, I think.
Yeah, and just the fact that he said separated is key. And also, James referred to Malik Golden and Troy Apke. They value experience and athleticism at safety, almost experience as important as athleticism. I think it's a great sign for Garrett Taylor. And you're right, Danny Dalton and Garrett Taylor quietly are, along with KJ Hamler, are quietly kind of becoming storylines with us probably halfway through Penn State spring practice.
All right, Bob.